At 7:58 in the morning, I stared at a scheduled email loaded with enough evidence to burn the HOA Karen's perfect little empire to the ground. My phone buzzed against the granite counter, lighting up with a single text that read, "You should have stayed quiet." I didn't reply. I simply watched the clock tick down. Letting that email fly was the moment I finally dug up the secrets the Pinecrest Estates board had buried for years. My name is Olivia Wallace, and at 34 years old I was standing in the center of my kitchen in our quiet little ranch house on Maple Lane, watching a digital timer count down the final 2 minutes of Karen Blake's reign as HOA president. The morning light of suburban Ohio was just beginning to filter through the blinds, casting long pale stripes across the counter. It was a Tuesday. The world outside was waking up to the rhythm of lawnmowers and kids heading to the bus stop, unaware that inside number 412, a nuclear option was currently pending in my drafts folder. My laptop hummed softly. The screen was the brightest thing in the room. An email client open, recipient field already populated with 5 addresses. The fraud department of RapidFi Lending, the state HOA regulatory board, the internal compliance officer at our management company, a blind carbon copy to my personal attorney, and one more for good measure. The subject line was stark: formal notice of identity theft and unauthorized financial activity. Case reference 9924. Attached were 4 PDFs I'd compiled with the ruthless precision that made me excellent at my day job as a compliance officer. A promissory note with my forged signature dated October 3rd, a notarized affidavit of non-participation, IP access logs matching the HOA corporate server, and a credit inquiry timeline. The evidence was boring. That was the beauty of white-collar neighborhood crime. It wasn't blood on the pavement. It was pixels and timestamps showing someone had logged into a loan portal using my social security number at 2 a.m. from a device named Karen Blake MacBook. The silence of the kitchen was shattered by a short, sharp buzz. My phone lit up. I knew who it was. The timing was too precise. The HOA board had a sixth sense for when one of their quiet residents was about to step out of line. The name Karen flashed on the screen. No more heart emoji. I deleted that 3 days ago. The preview read, "You should have stayed quiet." Then a second bubble. "Don't do something you can't take back. Olivia." You know how the board gets. It was a masterpiece of a threat wrapped in fake concern. In just 2 sentences, she combined intimidation with a guilt trip, invoking the HOA family like a weaponized deity. It wasn't an apology. It was an order from a woman who had spent 10 years believing the entire neighborhood existed to cushion her falls. She knew. She knew I had traced the loan. She knew I was awake right now. Karen had always assumed that if she pressed hard enough, I would fold because Olivia was the quiet one. Olivia was the one who understood the rules. Olivia was the one who could handle the heavy lifting because she was sturdy, boring, and reliable. I didn't pick up the phone. I didn't type a reply. I simply let the screen go dark. Behind me, the coffee grinder roared to life. "Sorry," Miles said, voice thick with sleep. "Didn't mean to startle you." I turned, leaning my lower back against the counter to hide the laptop. Miles stood by the coffee maker in his worn college t-shirt and flannel pajama pants, hair sticking up in 3 directions. He looked soft and safe and entirely too innocent for the war zone I was standing in. "It's okay," I said, voice thin. Cleared my throat. "Early start today?" He pulled 2 mugs down. "You've got that big audit meeting, right? With the shipping guys." "Something like that," I said. He didn't know. He didn't know that 3 nights ago a credit alert had stopped my heart. He didn't know his wife currently owed $50,000 to a lender she had never met. He didn't know the audit I was conducting was not for a client but for the very HOA that had been terrorizing our little street for years. I hadn't told him because I was ashamed. Ashamed that the board saw me as a resource to be harvested. Ashamed I had let it go on this long. Terrified that if I told him he would try to fix it with a check we couldn't afford. Miles was a fixer. He loved peace. But there would be no peace today. The smell of brewing coffee filled the air, rich and earthy. Today it made my stomach turn. I turned back to the laptop. 7:58 turned to 7:59. 1 minute left. My hand hovered over the trackpad. The cursor sat right over cancel schedule. It would be so easy to click it. If I clicked cancel, the email would disappear into drafts. I could call Karen. We could work something out. She would cry. She would say the real estate market was brutal, that she just needed a bridge loan to cover the staging costs for her latest listing, while also improving community aesthetics. She would promise to pay it back. The board would call and say how proud they were of us for sticking together as a neighborhood family. We would have the next HOA potluck. I would swallow my rage with the potato salad. I would smile. I would stay the good resident. I would stay the compliant one. And I would carry a $50,000 debt that wasn't mine, risking my own credit, my security clearance at work, and the future Miles and I were trying to build. My mind flashed back to last Sunday, the catalyst. It wasn't the discovery of the loan that had pushed me to this edge. I had found the loan on Friday. I had spent Saturday in shock. But it was the HOA emergency meeting that pulled the pin on the grenade. We were in the community clubhouse, the one with the fake chandelier and the no political signs banner that somehow never applied to Karen's election posters. The landscaping outside was manicured to within an inch of its life, exactly 2 inches of grass, as per Rule 4.7. Karen stood at the front in a cream cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my first car, laughing about a client who wanted a gold-plated birdbath. Can you imagine the violation? I sat there feeling the weight of the secret in my pocket. I had printed the credit report. It was folded into a tight square inside my jeans. I waited for a lull. Karen, I said, voice shaking slightly. I got a weird notification from Experian yesterday. The room went quiet. Not confused quiet, tense, heavy quiet. Karen didn't look at me. She took a sip of her sparkling water, eyes fixed on the HOA banner. Mrs. Carolyn, the board secretary, set down her clipboard. She looked at me with that exhausted patience expression she reserved for difficult residents. Olivia, she said. Not here. Not at the meeting. I haven't even said what it is yet, I replied. We know what it is, Gordon. The treasurer grunted from the head table, cutting his muffin with aggressive precision. My heart hammered. You know, Karen finally looked up, eyes wet with that instant weaponized vulnerability. I told the board I was in a bind. I told them I borrowed your info just for a placeholder until the commission check from the Victorian Village listing comes in. It's literally a matter of weeks. You forged my signature, I said. The words felt huge. You took out a loan in my name. That's a felony, Karen. Oh, stop it, Carolyn snapped. I recoiled as if slapped. Stop using words like felony, she continued, reaching over to cover Karen's hand. Our president is under immense pressure. Her image is her livelihood. If she can't maintain liquidity, she loses listings. If she loses listings, the whole board loses face. So I have to pay for it, I asked. Nobody is asking you to pay. Gordon waved his knife dismissively. She'll pay it back. She just needed a cosigner with a steady W-2. You have that. You're the stable one. You can absorb the risk. Karen cannot. You didn't ask me to co-sign, I said, voice rising. You stole my identity. Lower your voice, Carolyn hissed, glancing around as if neighbors were hiding in the artificial plants. You're being incredibly selfish. Olivia, you have your little job. You have Miles. You have your safe little life. Karen is out there fighting to keep our property values up. You should have stayed quiet and let her fix it. But instead you bring it up and ruin the entire meeting. You should have stayed quiet. That sentence. The mantra of every HOA meeting I had ever attended. Karen was the firework. I was the bucket of water. Karen was the protagonist. I was the narrator who wasn't supposed to interfere. I looked at them. Board members staring at Karen with concern and at me with annoyance. I realized they didn't see a neighbor. They saw a safety net. They saw a bank account. They saw a doormat that could breathe. I stood up. I didn't finish my coffee. I walked out while Carolyn called after me, telling me to stop being dramatic. That was 3 days ago. Back in the kitchen, the memory burned like heartburn. The clock flickered. 7:59 and 30 seconds. I could hear Miles pouring coffee. The liquid splashed. "Hey," he said, voice closer. "Toast or oatmeal?" I didn't answer. My eyes were locked on the screen. The text from Karen still glowed on my phone. "You should have stayed quiet. If I sent this email, there was no going back. The bank would investigate. Karen would lose her real estate license. The board would never forgive me. I would be the villain in every neighborhood Facebook group forever, the resident who sent the HOA president to jail. But if I didn't send it, I was agreeing that my name, my credit, and my life were less important than Karen's appearance of success. I was agreeing that I existed to be used. 7:59 and 50 seconds. My finger trembled. I moved the cursor away from cancel. I watched it hover over the grayed out send button. I could still stop it. I could close the laptop. I could delete the draft. "Liv?" Miles asked. He was right behind me now. I felt his heat. His hand rested on my shoulder. "You okay? You're shaking." I took a deep breath. The air smelled of coffee and faint floor cleaner. 7:59 and 58 seconds. 7:59 and 59 seconds. The numbers blurred. I didn't move my hand. I didn't click cancel. I just stood there grounded in the center of my own kitchen and waited for the world to end. The clock clicked 8 o'clock. The email status flashed from scheduled to sending. And then, with a cheerful little whoosh that seemed entirely too happy for the destruction it carried, the message vanished. Almost instantly my phone began to ring. It was a shrill, demanding tone. The screen lit up with a photo of Karen, perfect white-toothed smile. I looked at the phone. I looked at the sent folder. Miles leaned over. "Karen calling this early? Everything okay?" I turned to my husband for the first time in 3 days. My shoulders dropped. The shaking stopped. "No," I said, voice steady and clear. "Everything is definitely not okay." I reached out and silenced the call. "You have to understand the geography of Pinecrest Estates. Love wasn't a resource you were born with here. It was a currency you earned, and the exchange rate fluctuated constantly based on how much you resembled Karen Blake. We lived in a city that felt like a big small town where reputation clung to you like August humidity. The HOA treated the neighborhood like a curatorial project. We weren't just homeowners. We were exhibits. And if we were exhibits, Karen was the permanent collection, the masterpiece under the spotlight, while I was the piece in storage they brought out only when they needed a compliant vote. Karen was 2 years older than me in neighborhood seniority, and by the time she became president, she had already decided she was going to be the star. She didn't just walk into board meetings. She announced herself. She had the blonde hair that caught the light, the laugh that made strangers want to be in on the joke, and an innate ability to make chaos look like community leadership. I was different. I was the rough draft. I was the resident who needed time. The board used to tell new neighbors that Olivia was a late bloomer. They said it with tight smiles, the kind that suggested they were waiting for a flower that might turn out to be a weed. I didn't sparkle. I studied the rulebook. While Karen was being elected homecoming queen of the HOA and charming her way out of her own violations, I was in my home office organizing my compliance notes with color-coded tabs. I worked at North Harbor Compliance Group downtown. It wasn't sexy. It wasn't something you could brag about at the annual block party without eyes glazing over. But I loved it. I loved the structure. As a contract administrator, my world was governed by rules, clear lines between compliant and non-compliant. At work, nobody expected me to be charming. They expected me to be accurate. If a signature was missing, I flagged it. If a clause contradicted itself, I fixed it. I found comfort in black and white text because my neighborhood life had always been a confusing shade of gray. My husband Miles understood this about me. He was a landscape architect who worked with soil and roots, things that were real and tangible. When we met, he told me he liked how I actually listened instead of waiting for my turn to talk. He was the first person who made me feel like my quietness was a feature, not a bug. When Miles and I bought our house, we didn't tell the board until the closing papers were signed. It was a small 1950s ranch in the older section of Pinecrest. It had creaky wood floors, a drafty front window, and a backyard full of overgrown hostas. It was less than half the square footage of Karen's McMansion. The kitchen barely had room for 2 people, and the bathroom tile was a hideous shade of pink we affectionately called Pepto-Bismol chic. But it was ours. We paid for it dollar by dollar with money we had saved. There was no help from the board's emergency relief fund that somehow always went to Karen's projects. We moved in on a rainy Saturday in April. We ate pizza on the floor surrounded by boxes. And for the first time in years, I felt the walls of a home hugging me back. I didn't invite the board over for 3 months. Miles asked me about it one night while we were stripping wallpaper. He asked why we hadn't had a housewarming. I remember looking at him covered in drywall dust and trying to explain the unexplainable. I told him inviting the HOA board into my home felt like inviting a panel of judges to an audition I was destined to fail. I didn't want Gordon walking around tapping the walls and asking about insulation values. I didn't want Carolyn looking at our second-hand sofa with that pitying smile. I didn't want Karen standing in my small kitchen radiating success, making my life feel like a temporary stopover. I just wanted to be happy here first, I said, before they tell me what's wrong with it. But you can't hide forever. Eventually they came over for a barbecue. It went exactly as I feared. Karen parked her white SUV in front of our neighbor's driveway, blocking them in. She walked in wearing heels that cost more than our refrigerator. "It's so cozy," she said, dragging the word until it sounded like claustrophobic. She ran a finger along the mantel. "You know, with a little money you could knock down this wall. Open it up. Feels a little tight in here." "We like the walls," I said, handing her a drink. "We like having separate rooms." "Well, to each their own." She flashed that brilliant smile. "I just love space. I need room to breathe." Gordon spent the afternoon asking Miles how much we paid, shaking his head when he heard the number. "Market's inflated," he grumbled, chewing a burger. "You bought at the top. Rookie mistake." Karen got in before the surge. That woman has an instinct for value. Carolyn sat on our garage sale patio furniture looking like she might catch something from the cushions. "It's a charming starter home, Olivia. Good for just the 2 of you. But if you ever decide to have children, well, you'll obviously need to upgrade. You can't raise a family in a 2-bedroom. I looked at Miles. He was grilling corn. Back to them. I saw his shoulders stiffen. He knew how hard we had worked. He knew this wasn't a starter home to us. It was the finish line of a marathon we had run in weighted boots. "We're happy, Carolyn," I said. "Of course you are." She patted my arm. "And that's what matters. Not everyone needs to be ambitious." That was the dagger, the word ambitious. In the HOA dictionary, ambition wasn't about working hard or being ethical. It was about visibility. It was about size. If it wasn't big, it didn't count. I went inside to get more napkins and found Karen in my bedroom. She was standing by the dresser looking at our wedding photo. "You guys look cute," she said without turning. "Simple. I like it." "What are you doing in here?" I asked. "Just looking for the bathroom." She lied. The bathroom door was wide open down the hall. "Hey Liv, quick question. How's your credit these days? You guys got a good rate on this place." I frowned. We did fine. Why? Just curious. She finally turned, eyes darting around the room, assessing, calculating. Real estate is tricky right now. Rates are climbing. I have some clients struggling to qualify. Just made me wonder how you managed it on your salaries. We saved, I said coldly. And we have good credit scores. I pay my bills. Karen. Right? She laughed a little too hard. Miss Perfect punctual. Always by the book. Must be nice not to have any stress. I didn't know it then, but she wasn't looking for the bathroom. She was looking for files. She was looking for opportunity. Weeks passed. The seasons turned. Then the phone calls started changing. Usually the board only contacted me to give updates on Karen's triumphs or to issue another petty fine for my grass being 2.1 inches instead of exactly 2.0. But suddenly Carolyn was interested in me. She called on a Tuesday night. Olivia, honey, I was just thinking about you. How's the house? The house is fine, I said, putting my laptop away. The roof held up during the storm. That's good. And the mortgage, you guys managing? No trouble with payments. We're fine, I said, suspicious. Why? Oh, no reason. Just neighborly concern. You know, Gordon was saying smaller houses like yours are actually holding value quite well. You have equity sitting there. I suppose. Have you ever thought about leveraging it? The tone was casual, but I heard the tension underneath. It sounded rehearsed. Taking out a line of credit. Maybe doing those renovations. Karen suggested opening up the floor plan. We don't want to renovate. We don't have the money for it. Well, that's just it. If you applied for a loan, you would have the money. And you know, sometimes neighbors help each other with credit. If one person has a strong profile and another just needs a little boost. I stopped walking. I stood in the middle of my living room. Carolyn, are you asking me to take out a loan for Karen? No, of course not, she sputtered. I'm just speaking theoretically. Karen is having a momentary cash flow issue. The market is weird. Commissions are delayed. She has assets. She's rich on paper. She just needs liquidity. Tell her to sell the Mercedes, I said. Don't be spiteful, Carolyn snapped, sweetness evaporating. Our president has an image to maintain. She can't drive a Honda to meet clients. It would ruin her brand. You wouldn't understand that working in a back office. I understand math, I said. And I understand that if she needs money, she should go to a bank. She can't go to a bank right now, Carolyn whispered. Her debt-to-income ratio is complicated. It's just a timing thing. She needs a bridge. Gordon and I have helped as much as we can, but our retirement funds are tied up. So you want me to do it? I want you to be a neighbor, Carolyn said. I want you to stop hoarding your perfect little credit score and help the woman who has always looked out for the community. Karen had never looked out for me. She had fined me for a single political yard sign during election season while her own campaign banners stayed up year-round. I told Miles about the call. He was furious. He told me to block their numbers. He told me we were safe. That no was a complete sentence. And for a few weeks I believed him. I thought my refusal had closed the door. I was naive. I was a compliance officer who lived by rules. And I made the fatal mistake of assuming the HOA board played by the same ones. I assumed that when you said no, the other person stopped asking. I didn't realize that to people like Karen and Carolyn, no was not a wall. It was just a hurdle. And if I wouldn't open the door for them, they would simply find a window I had left unlocked. Or, as I would soon discover, they would forge a key. It started with a piece of mail. It was a generic envelope from a lender I didn't recognize. It looked like junk mail offering pre-approved credit. I almost threw it in the recycling. But the habit of my job kicked in. I checked the address. It was my name, Olivia Wallace, but the street was listed as 14 Oakview Lane, the board president's house. I opened it. Inside was a welcome packet congratulating me on securing a $50,000 home improvement loan. It listed the disbursement date as October 3rd. At the bottom, it thanked me for choosing them to help finance the renovation of the property at Karen's address. I stood by the mailbox, wind whipping my hair. The world tilted. I was not just the quiet resident anymore. I was the co-signer, and nobody had bothered to ask me for the pen. To understand the anatomy of the betrayal, you have to look at the week leading up to the discovery. It was a masterclass in emotional extortion wrapped in the soft, suffocating cotton of neighborhood values. It began with the weaponization of language. In the HOA dictionary, the word help did not mean assistance. It meant tribute. 2 days after I told Carolyn I would not leverage my home for Karen, my phone rang while I was at my desk. It was 11 a.m. I was reviewing a compliance checklist. I saw Carolyn's name and debated voicemail, but conditioning ran deep. I picked up. "Olivia," she said, voice soft and trembling, pitched to hit my guilt centers. "I know you're working and I'm sorry to bother you. I just wanted to apologize for snapping at the meeting. I'm just so worried. Liv." She paused, waiting for me to fill the silence. I didn't. "It's Karen," she continued in a conspiratorial whisper. "She's in a dark place. This market shift has shaken her confidence. She's not sleeping. Gordon says he heard her crying in the guest room last night. She's just so fragile right now." "I'm sorry she's stressed," I said neutrally. "It's not just stress," Carolyn said. "It's a crisis of identity. You know how hard she works to keep our property values up. She just needs to get over this one hump. Just one little bridge loan to get her to the spring listings. Once those hit, she'll be flush again. She just needs breathing room." Then came the pivot, so smooth I almost admired it. "You're doing so much better than I thought. Olivia. You and Miles are so steady. You're the rock. I always knew you were the strong one. Karen burns bright, but she burns out. You're the one who lasts. Carolyn, where is this going? I was just thinking if you could just lend your name. Not even your money, just your credibility. Like a character reference, but financial. Just to show the bank she has backing. She would make all the payments. Gordon would oversee it personally. You would just be the silent partner, the hero in the shadows." "Co-signing is not being a silent partner," I said, gripping my pen. "It's being fully liable for the debt." "Why do you always have to make it sound so legal?" she sighed, softness evaporating. "We're neighbors. We're not a corporation. But fine. If you cannot find it in your heart to help our president when she's drowning, that's your choice." She hung up. The guilt lingered like stale smoke. That evening the second wave hit. It was Gordon. His text arrived at 7:30 while Miles and I were eating stir-fry. "Family, excuse me. Neighborhood is not a menu you order from only when you're hungry. It's a table you sit at even when the food is burnt. Money comes and goes. Olivia, I have lost fortunes and made them back. But community is permanent. You are treating a transaction like it is more important than a relationship." Disappointing. I read the text to Miles. He put down his chopsticks and rubbed his temples. "He's talking about money coming and going but never mentions the years you worked 2 jobs. They act like our stability is an accident that we owe them a tax on." "They think I'm selfish," I said. "They think you're an ATM that forgot its PIN," Miles corrected. But the final and most dangerous approach came from Karen herself. It happened late that night, past 11 o'clock. We were in bed, lights out. My phone buzzed. A series of texts from Karen. "Hey, sorry about Carolyn. She's intense." Then, "I don't want you to feel pressured. I'll figure it out." I always do. I felt momentary relief. Maybe she understood. I started to type a reply. But before I could send, the third text came. "Random question. Do you have that appraisal report from when you guys bought the house? The one with the comp values for the neighborhood?" I frowned. "Why?" Just for market research, she replied instantly. I'm trying to price a listing a few streets over. The comps are weird. Just wanted to see what the bank valued your square footage at back then versus now. Also, who's your mortgage servicer? Chase or Wells? I stared at the screen in the dark. Felt wrong. It felt like a burglar asking for the blueprints of the vault just to admire the architecture. I don't have the paperwork handy, I lied. And we're with a local credit union. Cool. No worries. Just doing late-night homework. Love you, Liv. I put the phone down but couldn't sleep. The questions felt predatory. She wasn't asking about my life. She was asking about my data points. She was sizing up the asset. The next morning I made my decision. I sent a message to the neighborhood board chat. I wanted it in writing. I have thought about it and I cannot co-sign or offer any financial backing right now. Miles and I have our own goals and we need to keep our debt-to-income ratio clean. I hope you understand. Please do not ask again. I watched the read receipts appear. Nobody typed back. An hour passed. Then 2. By noon the chat was still silent. But then I noticed something else. Carolyn had left the group chat for the next potluck planning. Karen had posted a photo on the HOA Facebook page. It was her, Carolyn, and Gordon at a lunch spot downtown, holding glasses of white wine. The caption read, "The people who always have my back. Circle of trust. Real neighbors." I felt a cold knot in my stomach. It was the silent treatment, the oldest punishment in the HOA playbook. If you do not comply, you cease to exist. You are excised from the narrative until you crawl back with an apology and a checkbook. I went home that night feeling heavy. I felt like the bad neighbor. I felt like the selfish resident who chose a credit score over community spirit. I sat on the back porch with Miles. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across our overgrown garden. Did I do the wrong thing? I asked. Miles took my hand. Do you remember why we didn't invite them to the housewarming? Because I didn't want the criticism. Because you wanted peace, he said. Look at me. What do you want your life to feel like? Do you want it to feel like a performance for them, or do you want it to feel like this? He gestured to the quiet yard, the fading light, the half-empty mugs of tea. I want it to be peaceful, I whispered. Then you stood your ground. Peace costs something, Liv. Sometimes it costs their approval. I nodded. He was right. I felt resolution. I had drawn a boundary. They were angry. Yes. But I was safe. I had said no. And that was the end of it. I was wrong. 2 days later, on a Friday, the notification arrived. It was not a text from the board. It was not a phone call. I was at work clearing my personal email. I saw a subject line that looked like spam. Thank you for choosing RapidFi Lending. Document verification complete. I hovered over delete, but something made me pause. The preview text, Dear Olivia Wallace, your loan documents for the amount of $50,000 have been successfully processed. Your first payment is scheduled for November 1st. My heart stopped. I opened the email. It was legitimate. It listed my full name, my correct social security number. And then I saw the attachment. Signed promissory note PDF. My hand shook so hard I could barely click. There at the bottom was a digital signature. Olivia Wallace. Next to it in the witness notary field was a stamp from a notary public I knew, the woman who worked at the front desk of Karen's real estate brokerage. I stared at the screen. The office sounds faded into buzzing static. I had said no. I had drawn the line. I had accepted the silent treatment and the exclusion. But they had not accepted my no. They had simply bypassed it. I looked at the date on the document. October 3rd. The same night Karen had texted me asking for the comps. She had not been doing homework. She had been filling out the application and she needed to know exactly how much equity I had so she could borrow against it. She had stolen my name. She had stolen my credit. And she had done it while telling the neighborhood she loved community. I sat back in my ergonomic office chair. The air conditioning blasted cold against my skin, but I was sweating. My phone on the desk was silent. There were no new messages from the board chat. They were quiet. And now I knew why. They were not ignoring me because they were angry. They were staying quiet because they were waiting for the check to clear. The notification from the credit monitoring app detonated in my pocket at 2 p.m. on Friday. The office was winding down, weekend anticipation filling the cubicles, but I was frozen, staring at a red arrow pointing downward on my phone screen. Your credit score has dropped by 42 points. I tapped the alert. There, sitting at the top of my credit report like a fresh wound, was a new trade line. RapidFi lending open account, balance $50,000, status current. Date opened October 3rd. I felt the blood drain from my face. It was one thing to see a welcome letter. It was another to see it reported to the bureau. This was real. This was a debt the world now believed belonged to me. I didn't scream. I didn't run out of the room. I did what I had been trained to do. I went into investigation mode. I grabbed a notepad. I put on noise-canceling headphones. I dialed RapidFi's fraud department. The hold music was a distorted saxophone loop that played for 12 minutes. Finally, a voice clicked on. RapidFi Security. This is Marcus. Can I have your full name and case number? I don't have a case number, I said, voice frighteningly calm. My name is Olivia Wallace. I'm looking at a loan on my credit report that I did not authorize. I need to know how this happened. Okay, Ms. Wallace. I can look into that. Can you confirm your current home address? 412 Maple Street. There was a pause. I'm sorry. That does not match the address we have on file. I closed my eyes. What address do you have? I cannot disclose that for security reasons. Is it 14 Oakview Lane? My parents know. Karen's address. Another pause. Yes, ma'am. That is the address on the application. I have not lived there in 7 years, I said. What about the email address? Is it oliviawallace@northharbor.com? No, ma'am. The contact email is listed as liv.wallace.realestate@gmail.com. I wrote it down. The ink bled because I was pressing so hard. It was a fake account created solely to intercept communications so I would never see the warnings. Marcus, this is identity theft. I need you to flag this account immediately. How is this loan even approved? Did you not call to verify employment? One moment. Employment was verified via digital document submission. We received a letter of employment and proof of income from the applicant's employer. I work for North Harbor Compliance. That is not who is listed here. The employer of record on the loan is Pinecrest Realty Partners, Karen's brokerage. And the income? The applicant submitted a commission statement and base salary verification signed by the managing broker, stating an annual income of $120,000. I hung up. I did not say goodbye. It was not just Karen. Someone at her office, someone with authority, had helped her. They had created a fake personnel file for me. They had listed me as an employee of her brokerage, fabricated a salary, and sent it to the lender. This was conspiracy. This was wire fraud. I unlocked my computer. My hands shook, but my movements were precise. I navigated to the Secretary of State's website. I pulled up the corporate filing for Pinecrest Realty. Then I opened my personal files. I needed the timeline. I started a spreadsheet. October 1st, credit inquiry initiated. October 2nd, fake email address created. October 3rd, loan approved and dispersed. I checked my text history. On October 3rd, Karen had sent me a picture of shoes she wanted to buy. Do you think these are too much? She had been shopping with the money she had just stolen from my future. I dug deeper. I logged into my main email and searched trash and spam for anything containing credit or loan. I found it. A single notification from a credit bureau that had slipped through 2 weeks ago. New inquiry detected. The IP address of the device that initiated the inquiry was listed in the metadata. Copied it. I opened a geolocation tool. The pin dropped squarely on the commercial district in Upper Arlington, right on the block that housed Karen's brokerage office. The pieces locked together with a terrifying click. Karen had done this from her work computer. She had used her office resources to fabricate my employment. She had used Carolyn's address to route the physical mail. She had used a burner email to catch the digital notifications. She had built a trap and used my name as the bait. I printed everything. The credit report. The map with the IP address. The notes from Marcus. The stack of paper grew thicker. I was reaching for the stapler when my cell phone rang. The screen lit up. Karen. I stared at it. I had not called her. I had not told a soul. But she knew. If she had access to the loan account, she probably had alerts set up. She would know I had called the bank. She would know the account had been flagged. I picked up. I didn't say hello. I just held it to my ear and breathed. Liv. Karen's voice was high, breathless. Hey, are you there? I'm here. Okay, good. So listen. I just got a weird notification on my end about the financing thing. Did you speak to someone today? The financing thing? Is that what we're calling it? Liv, please. Her voice dropped. I can explain. It's not what it looks like. It was a placeholder. I told you I just needed a bridge. You forged my signature, Karen. I didn't forge it, she said quickly. I authorized it on your behalf because I knew you would want to help if you understood the full picture. You were just being stubborn because you were scared. I took the fear out of the equation for you. You took the choice out of the equation, I said. And you involved your brokerage. You falsified employment records. Do you have any idea what you've done? Stop using that compliance voice, she snapped. You sound like a robot. This is real life. Olivia. People bend rules. That's how business works. I'm gonna pay it back. I have the commission check coming in 2 weeks. I was gonna pay it off in full before you even knew it existed. It was supposed to be seamless. But I do know, I said. And the bank knows. I just got off the phone with them. Silence. Terrified silence. What did you tell them? She whispered. I told them I didn't sign it. Olivia, she said, you have to call them back. You have to tell them it was a misunderstanding. You have to tell them you forgot you signed it. Tell them you were confused. You want me to lie to a federal bank regulator? I want you to save my life, she screamed. If they investigate this, I lose my license. I lose the house. I lose everything. Do you understand? You will destroy me. I didn't do this, I said. You did. We're neighbors, she cried. Doesn't that mean anything to you? I changed your weight. I helped you with that violation last year. I walked you through the appeal process. You owe me. I owe you $50,000, I asked. It's just money, she yelled. It's numbers on a screen. Why do you care more about numbers than you care about the community? I looked at the stack of papers on my desk, the evidence of her betrayal. It wasn't just numbers. It was the contempt, the absolute certainty she possessed that my life was hers to spend. I'm not calling them back, I said. Wait, she said, voice shifting to desperate pleading. Wait, just don't do anything else yet. Please, let me see you. Let me explain the plan. I have a plan to fix it. I just need you to hear me out face to face. Please live. For the board's sake. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to hang up and call the police right then. But another part, the part that had spent 34 years seeking neighborhood approval, faltered. Tonight, she said. Meet me at that coffee shop on 3rd, the one near your office, 5:30. I will bring the paperwork. I will show you how I'm going to pay it back. Just give me 10 minutes. I looked at the clock. It was 4:45. Fine, I said. 5:30. And Olivia, she said, Sweetness back but brittle now. Don't tell Miles. And don't tell anyone else. If this gets out, if the neighborhood finds out, it will kill morale. You know how fragile the board's reputation is. Keep this between us until we fix it. Okay. I'll see you at 5:30, I said. I hung up. I sat there in the silence of my office. Don't tell anyone. It was the classic abuser's request. Isolate the victim. Control the narrative. Make the silence a condition of the relationship. I looked at the stack of evidence. I picked up the papers and slid them into my briefcase. I was going to meet her. I was going to hear her out, but I was not going to stay quiet. I opened my email one last time. I drafted a new message. I did not send it. I just saved it. Subject: Meeting notes. October 20th. I was not going to a neighborhood coffee. I was going to a deposition and I was bringing the receipts. The coffee shop Karen had chosen was the kind of place where every table had a perfect view of the HOA community values poster on the wall. She was already there when I arrived. Sitting in the corner booth looking radiant in another cream sweater. 2 lattes waiting like peace offerings. Her smile was bright but her eyes were calculating. Liv, she said, standing to hug me as if we were best friends. Thank you for coming. I knew you'd do the right thing for the neighborhood. I sat down without returning the hug. Cut the act, Karen. I have the IP logs. I have the forged letterhead from your brokerage. I have everything. Her smile didn't falter but her knuckles whitened around the latte cup. It's not forgery if it's for the greater good. The loan was for community improvements. My new patio is going to raise everyone's property values. You know how important curb appeal is under Rule 3.2. Rule 3.2 is about lawn height, not stealing identities, I said quietly. The barista glanced over but Karen waved her away with that practiced charm. Look, I'll pay it back. I have the commission check coming. But if this gets out, the entire board looks bad. Think of the children, their college funds are tied to our property values. You wouldn't want to be the resident who tanked the market, would you? I laughed. A short, bitter sound that surprised even me. You forged my signature on an official loan document using HOA server access. That's not curb appeal. That's felony fraud. Her eyes narrowed. The mask slipped just a fraction. You always were the stickler for rules. That's why we kept you around. Quiet, reliable Olivia who never complains about the fines. Remember the $250 birdbath violation? You paid it without a word. This is the same thing. Just a little paperwork mix-up. A $50,000 mix-up that shows up on my credit report, I countered. And you used your brokerage letterhead to verify fake employment. The state regulator is going to love that. She leaned forward, voice dropping to a hiss. Sign the retroactive authorization I brought. Says you approved it all along. I'll pay you an extra $2,000 cash today as a thank you from the board. And in exchange I'll fix the narrative on the HOA Facebook page. I'll post that you're the hero who stepped up for the community. Everyone will love you again. Or she let the threat hang. Or I can make sure every resident knows you're the jealous one trying to take down the president who has given everything to this neighborhood. I looked at the document she slid across the table, retroactive authorization. It was a suicide note for my integrity. I glanced at the clock on the wall. It was 5:45. I need to think about it, I said. There's no time to think, she snapped. The bank needs an answer by morning or they freeze everything. I'll give you my answer in the morning, I replied. At 8 o'clock. I stood up. Sit down, she ordered, but I was already walking. If you walk out that door, she called after me, voice rising just enough for the barista to hear. You're starting a war. I turned back. For the first time, I didn't see the star. I didn't see the queen. I saw a scared, pathetic woman who had to steal her quiet neighbor's shadow just to feel tall. I'm not starting a war, Karen, I said. I'm just ending the occupation. I walked out into the cool evening air. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. They were shaking from the adrenaline of realization. They had shown me their hand. Gordon had slipped at the meeting earlier that day when he said, "I told her to put the income under consulting." Karen's threat had signed the warrant. "I'll make sure you never work in compliance again." Who hires a compliance officer who commits loan fraud? "It was your word against mine," she had said. And look at us. Who do people believe? The successful, charismatic realtor president or the quiet, mousy resident nobody really knows? I got into my car and locked the doors. I sat there in the dark parking lot thinking about the email sitting in my drafts folder. The one scheduled for 8 a.m. I had hesitated before. I had wondered if I was being too harsh. But Gordon's slip and Karen's threat had sealed it. They were willing to destroy my actual life to save their fake one. I started the car. I wasn't going to cancel the email. I was going to add an attachment. I drove home, streetlights blurring past. Miles was waiting. He looked at my face and didn't say a word. He just handed me a glass of wine. "Did they apologize?" he asked. "No," I said. "They negotiated." I sat down at my kitchen counter. I opened my laptop. I opened the scheduled email. I typed a new paragraph. Furthermore, during a meeting on the evening of October 20th, Mr. Gordon Wallace admitted to advising the applicant on how to circumvent income verification protocols, establishing a conspiracy to defraud. I didn't have a recording, but the investigation would find the digital footprints. Gordon was arrogant. He would have left a trail. I looked at the time. The email was set for 8 o'clock. It was the only weapon I had, and in less than 12 hours I was going to pull the trigger. The morning after the coffee shop confrontation, I did not go to the office. I took a personal day, but it was not for rest. It was for strategy. I sat in the sterile gray conference room of a legal consultancy firm on the outskirts of town. Across from me sat Sarah, who specialized in financial fraud resolution. Her face was grim. "It's binary, Olivia. There is no middle ground here. You cannot sort of fix this. You cannot pay it off quietly and keep your record clean." "Explain," I said. "If you make a single payment, you are acknowledging the debt. In the eyes of the credit bureaus and the law, that payment is a signature. It's an admission. Once you do that, you lose the right to claim fraud later. You own the debt. And if Karen stops paying, which, given her history, is a statistical probability, you are on the hook for the full $50,000 plus interest plus the damage to your credit score, which will take 7 to 10 years to recover. And if I report it, then you are a victim of a crime. The bank absorbs the loss. They go after the perpetrator. They will file a police report because federal banking regulations require it for amounts this size. It creates a criminal record for the applicant." I looked at the papers. "So I either sacrifice my financial future or I sacrifice Karen." Sarah looked at me over her glasses. "You're looking at it wrong. You are not sacrificing her. She already jumped off the cliff. The only question is whether you are going to let her drag you down with her." I drove home with that sentence ringing in my ears. She already jumped off the cliff. When I got back to my house, the silence was absolute. Miles was at work. The neighborhood was quiet except for the distant hum of a lawn mower. Someone else getting fined for 2.1 inches, no doubt. I made a pot of coffee, black, and sat down at the dining table with the employment file Karen had submitted to the lender. I needed to be sure before I pushed the button that would detonate the entire board. I spread the documents out. I looked at the loan application. I looked at the income verification, and then I saw it. In my initial panic, I had missed the letterhead. The employment verification letter stating that I, Olivia Wallace, was a senior consultant earning $120,000 a year, was printed on official corporate letterhead, Pinecrest Realty Partners. It had the logo. It had the corporate address. It had the registration number of Karen's brokerage. I felt a chill go down my spine. This changed everything. Until this moment I had thought this was a personal crime. I thought it was just Karen acting alone, maybe with clumsy help from Gordon. But this was corporate malfeasance. Karen had used her company's official assets to facilitate fraud. She had used their letterhead to verify false information for a federal loan. I knew enough about real estate to know what this meant. Pinecrest Realty was a large firm. They had compliance protocols. They had insurance policies. They had a legal obligation to prevent their agents from using the company name to commit crimes. If the lender found out that a Pinecrest agent had used Pinecrest letterhead to forge a loan, the lender could sue the brokerage. The brokerage could lose its license. The blowback would be nuclear. Karen hadn't just exposed herself. She had exposed her entire firm. And Gordon, he had said he advised her. If he had advised her to use that letterhead, he was part of a conspiracy to defraud a corporate entity. I sat back. My hands were trembling not from fear but from the sheer scale of their stupidity. They had built a bomb in the living room and were surprised I was afraid of the ticking. I opened my laptop. It was time. I typed the subject line. I kept it sterile. Formal affidavit of identity theft and unauthorized financial activity. Account number ending in 4429. I took a sip of coffee. The bitterness grounded me. I began to write like the machine North Harbor Compliance Group paid me to be. To the Fraud Investigation Unit, please accept this correspondence and the attached exhibits as a formal notification that the loan referenced above was opened fraudulently using my personal identifying information without my consent, knowledge, or authorization. I stopped. I thought about the coffee shop. I thought about Carolyn saying, "We're protecting the neighborhood name." I typed the next paragraph. I have not resided at the address listed on the application for 7 years. The email address associated with the account does not belong to me. The employment verification document submitted with the application is a forgery, as I have never been employed by Pinecrest Realty Partners in any capacity. I attached the files. Exhibit A, copy of my actual driver's license and utility bills proving my residence. Exhibit B, copy of my actual W-2 forms from North Harbor. Exhibit C, the forged employment letter on Pinecrest letterhead. Then I went to the recipient field. I entered the bank's fraud department. Then I paused. If I sent this only to the bank, they would handle it internally. But Karen had threatened me. She had threatened to destroy my career. She had threatened to lie to the neighborhood and say I was the one who begged for the money. If I wanted to survive this, I needed witnesses. I needed the truth on the record in more than one place. I opened a new tab. I searched for Pinecrest Realty Corporate Compliance. I found it, a whistleblower hotline and a direct email for their legal department. I copied it into the CC field. I was not just reporting a bad loan. I was reporting an agent who was using the brokerage to commit felonies. I was handing Pinecrest Realty the evidence they needed to clean their own house. I added one more email address, my personal attorney. The email was complete. It was a bullet, sleek, aerodynamic, and deadly. I looked at the clock. It was 2 p.m. I could send it now. But I remembered the training in crisis management. Never execute a permanent decision in a state of high emotion. I was angry. My blood was humming. If I sent it now, I might regret the tone. I needed to sleep on it. I moved the cursor to schedule send. Tomorrow 8 a.m. The email vanished into the outbox. Scheduled. I closed the laptop. The sound of the lid snapping shut was the loudest thing I had heard all day. I sat there in the quiet house until the sun went down. I watched the light fade from the kitchen. I watched the shadows lengthen across the floor. When Miles came home, he found me sitting in the dark. He didn't turn on the lights. He just walked over and sat next to me. "Did you do it?" he asked. "I wrote it," I said. "It's scheduled for tomorrow morning. 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock, he nodded. He got up and poured us 2 glasses of water. "Are you sure? Liv." His voice was gentle. "Once that email goes out, there's no taking it back. The bank will see the Pinecrest documents. Karen will lose her job. The board, they might never forgive you. I took a sip of water. It was cool and clean. I know. They will say I ruined the neighborhood. They will say I did this out of spite. I'm not doing it to hurt them, I said. I turned to look at him and realized that for the first time in weeks the knot in my stomach was gone. I'm not making them look bad, Miles. They did that themselves. I'm just refusing to hide the body for them anymore. I'm retiring from the cover-up business. Miles smiled. He reached out and touched my face. I'm proud of you. I'm terrified, I admitted. That's how you know you're doing the right thing, he said. We made dinner. We ate in the living room watching a mindless comedy show trying to pretend the world wasn't going to explode in 12 hours. And then the phone started ringing. It started at 9 o'clock. It was Karen. I let it ring. 5 minutes later it rang again. Carolyn. I flipped the phone over. Then a text came through. We need to talk. I have a new idea. Just pick up. I didn't. Another text. Don't do this. Liv, I'm begging you. I can fix it. I turned the volume off. The screen lit up again and again. It was a strobe light of desperation. They knew. Somehow they knew the silence was different this time. They could feel the control slipping away. At 11 o'clock the landline rang. We hadn't used the landline in years. We only kept it for emergencies. Unplug it, Miles said. I walked over to the wall and pulled the cord. The ringing stopped mid-chirp. I went back to the bedroom. I plugged my cell phone into the charger. It lit up one last time before I turned off the lamp. You are going to regret this. You should have stayed quiet. I looked at the message. The same words. The same command. I lay down in the dark. I listened to Miles breathing beside me. I listened to the wind outside. I closed my eyes. For 34 years I had stayed quiet. I had swallowed my words. I had dimmed my light. I had let them edit my life. But tomorrow at 8 o'clock the silence would end. Tomorrow the email would speak for me and it would say everything I had never been brave enough to say to their faces. The dawn did not break. It shattered. I had barely slept, drifting in and out of a shallow, anxious doze where dreams of paperwork and prison bars mingled with the sound of Carolyn's voice. I woke at 6 a.m. Not to an alarm but to the relentless vibrating buzz of my phone on the nightstand. It was dancing across the wood, a manic mechanical seizure that told me the war had already begun. I reached for it, eyes gritty, heart hammering. I expected angry texts. What I found was a public execution. I opened the HOA Facebook page. Karen had posted a story 3 hours ago, likely in the dead of night fueled by wine and panic. It was a photo of her looking out a rainy window, artfully black and white, her silhouette tragic and small against the glass. The caption was a masterpiece of vague, weaponized victimhood. They say neighbors are thicker than water, but sometimes the people who are supposed to hold you up are the ones who cut the safety net just to watch you fall. I am heartbroken to realize that jealousy can turn a resident into a stranger. I built this neighborhood from scratch, and it hurts when people who have never taken a risk try to tear down what they do not understand. Staying strong. Focusing on the people who actually care about our community. She had not tagged me. She didn't have to. The comments were already rolling in. Stay strong. Queen. Jealousy is a disease. Neighborhood, can be so toxic. Cut them off. I sat up in bed, the cold blue light illuminating the room. She was spinning the narrative. She was preempting the explosion. By the time my email landed on the desks of the fraud investigators, she wanted the neighborhood to believe I was a vindictive, unstable resident attacking her out of spite. She was inoculating the jury before the trial even started. Then came the direct fire. A text from Carolyn popped up at 6:15. I saw Karen's post. I hope you are happy. She is devastated. Olivia, she is sobbing. Do you really want to be the reason our president has a breakdown? You are holding a match to this neighborhood. And for what? To prove a point. You can stop this. Just delete the email. Do not destroy us. I felt a wave of nausea. Carolyn didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't ask about the crime. She only cared about the noise. I went to the kitchen to make coffee, needing something to do with my hands. Miles was already up, laptop open. He looked at me, face grim. "Don't look at the HOA page," he said gently. "Why?" "Just don't." I looked anyway. Karen had cross-posted to her personal profile. The comments there were from aunts, cousins, longtime residents, people who had known me since I moved in, sending prayers. Karen, so sad when neighbors turn on each other. I felt like I was standing in the center of a circle watching people throw stones at a version of me that didn't exist. I wasn't the aggressor. I was the one with a $50,000 noose around my neck. But the truth was slow and lies were fast. At 6:45, the strategy shifted. The stick was replaced by the carrot. My phone rang. It was Karen. I let it go to voicemail. Immediately a text appeared. "Pick up. I am not fighting. I have a proposal." My thumb hovered. I wanted to ignore her. I wanted to let the clock run down to 8 o'clock. But a small, terrified part of me wondered if maybe she had woken up. Maybe she had realized the madness. I typed back, "Text me. I am not talking." 3 dots pulsed. "Okay, here is the deal. You sign the retro authorization. I take the loan, but I sign a separate contract with you, notarized by a lawyer of your choice, promising to pay you back in installments starting next month. And in exchange for you signing, I will fix this online. I will make a new post. I will say we worked it out. I will say you are the best neighbor in the world and that you saved the day. I will rebuild your image. Liv, I can make you look like a hero or I can let you look like the villain. It is your choice." I read the message twice. It was a transaction. She was holding my reputation hostage and offering to sell it back to me in exchange for my compliance. She wasn't offering to pay the debt because it was her debt. She was offering to pay it as a favor. "And I will pay you an extra $2,000 cash today," she added. To show good faith. I looked at the coffee maker watching the dark liquid drip. It was tempting. God, it was tempting. If I agreed, the war would stop. The notifications would stop. Carolyn would love me again. We would have the next potluck and everyone would smile and the secret would be buried under the floorboards rotting quietly. I could go back to being the quiet one, the safe one. I was actually considering it. I was calculating the risk, wondering if I could draft a contract tight enough to bind her. And then my email chimed. It was not a message from the board. It was an automated alert from the credit monitoring service I had signed up for the day before. Activity alert. Modification request detected. I frowned. I opened the app. A request had been submitted to the lender at 3 o'clock that morning. Request type: contact information update. Change primary email address updated to karen.realestate.main@gmail.com. Request type: payment deferment application. I froze. 3 a.m. While Karen was posting on Facebook about betrayal and heartbreak, she had logged into the loan portal using my credentials. She had changed the email address to cut me out of the loop again. And worse, she had applied for a payment deferment. She had told me at the coffee shop that she had the money. She said the commission checks were coming. But here was the truth written in the digital logs. She was asking to skip the very first payment. She was broke. She didn't have the commissions. There was no bridge. The loan wasn't a stopgap. It was a desperate attempt to plug a hole in a sinking ship that was already underwater. If I signed her deal, if I agreed to take on this debt, she would default. It was a mathematical certainty. She would miss the first payment and the second and the third, and I would be left holding the bag, legally bound by my own signature with no recourse. The deal was a trap. It was not an olive branch. It was a landmine. I looked back at her text. "I will pay you back in installments." Lies. All of it. I felt a cold fury settle over me. It was the clarity of the compliance officer taking over. I typed a reply, "I just got an alert. You tried to defer the payment at 3 a.m. You don't have the money, Karen. There is no deal." I hit send. The reaction was instantaneous. The phone rang. I declined it. Then came the text. The mask didn't just slip. It shattered. "You little..." I stared at the words. "I know what you have to lose, Olivia. You think you are so squeaky clean. I know about the mistake you made on the Henderson audit 3 years ago. I know you didn't flag that vendor until a week late. How would North Harbor like it if I sent an anonymous tip to their ethics board? How would they like to know their star compliance officer has a history of covering things up?" I gasped. The Henderson audit. It was a minor error I had made early in my career. A simple oversight I had corrected immediately and self-reported, but I had told Karen about it over wine one night, crying because I was stressed. I had trusted her with my vulnerability. Now she was sharpening it into a shiv. "And Miles," she continued. "Does Miles know that you still text your ex-boyfriend on his birthday? I can make things very messy for you. Liv, I can make your life a living hell. Or you can sign the paper and we go back to being a happy neighborhood." She was threatening my marriage. She was threatening my career. She was burning the earth to force me into submission. I looked at Miles. He must have felt my distress because he stopped typing and turned to me. "What is it?" I handed him the phone. He read the text. His face went hard. He read the thread about the audit. He read the threat about the ex-boyfriend, a harmless platonic happy birthday text that Miles knew about because I told him everything. Miles stood up. He walked around the island and took my hands. His grip was firm. "She is drowning, Liv. And she is trying to climb on top of your head to breathe. She is going to try to get me fired," I whispered. "She is going to lie to everyone." "Let her," Miles said. "Let her lie. The truth is boring. Liv, the truth is documents and timestamps and IP addresses, and you have all of that. But Carolyn, your mom on the board is protecting the investment, not the resident," Miles said. It was harsh, but it was true. "Liv, listen to me. If you sign that paper, you are telling them that it is okay to treat you like this. You are telling them that your safety has a price and they can afford it." He looked me in the eye. "I don't care about the money. We can survive $50,000. We can pay it off if we have to. But I cannot survive watching you disappear again. I cannot watch you shrink yourself to fit into their box. Whatever happens at 8 o'clock, promise me one thing." "What?" "Don't go back to being the one who bears it alone. We are a team. If she attacks you, she attacks us. If she comes for your job, we fight. But we do it in the light. No more secrets." I nodded. Tears pricked my eyes. "Okay." I took the phone back. I opened the email app on my laptop. It was 7:55. The email was there in the scheduled folder. Subject: Formal affidavit of identity theft. All I had to do was nothing. If I sat here and drank my coffee, the email would go. The nuclear launch sequence was already initiated. But my fingers shook. The threats were real. Karen could cause damage. She could make my work life difficult. She could embarrass me. She could fracture the neighborhood permanently. There would be no coming back from this. No more block parties. No more friendly waves. I would be an outcast with living neighbors. 7:56. My phone buzzed again. "Carolyn, Olivia, please pick up the phone. Gordon is having chest pains." "Do you want to kill him?" A low blow. Using Gordon's health, which was perfectly fine yesterday, as a weapon. I hovered the mouse over the cancel send button. It would be so easy to stop it. Just one click and the pressure vanishes. Click and I sign the paper. Click and I buy the piece. "Liv," Miles said softly. He wasn't telling me what to do. He was just witnessing me. I looked at the screen. I looked at the text from Carolyn. I looked at the threat from Karen. You should have stayed quiet. I realized then that silence wasn't peace. Silence was the soil where their corruption grew. 7:58. I looked at the cancel button. I remembered the fake email address. I remembered the deferred payment request. I remembered the loan application with the forged Pinecrest letterhead. They weren't afraid of me ruining the neighborhood. The neighborhood was already ruined. They were afraid of the inspection. I took my hand off the mouse. I clasped my hands together in my lap. I watched the clock. 7:59. The longest minute of my life. My phone rang again. Karen. I let it ring. I watched the seconds tick down. 55. 56. 57. I didn't click cancel. I let the email send. 8 o'clock in the morning. The countdown had moved from hours to minutes, and the atmosphere in my small kitchen had shifted from anxious to final. The sun was fully up now, a pale, indifferent light washing over the countertops, exposing the dust motes dancing in the air. I sat on a stool, spine rigid, hands wrapped around a ceramic mug that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. My phone lying face down on the granite began to buzz. It was not a notification. It was a call. I knew who it was without turning it over. It was the specific frantic vibration of a woman who realized she had lost control of the script. I let it ring 3 times. Then, against my better judgment, against Miles's silent advice from across the room, I picked it up. Hello, Olivia. It was Carolyn. But the voice was wrong. The imperious command and control tone from the meeting was gone. The icy disappointment had evaporated. In its place was a raw, trembling panic that sounded terrifyingly small. I am listening, Carolyn, I said. Please, she whispered. Please, honey, I am asking you. I am begging you. Do not send it. It is scheduled, Carolyn. It goes at 8 o'clock. I will talk to her, she said, words tumbling out in a rush. I promise, Olivia. I will make her pay it. I will force her to sell the car. I will make Gordon liquidate his bonds. We will get the money. You will not have to pay a dime. Just cancel the email. Give us 24 hours. You had 3 weeks, I said. You had a meeting. You had a coffee meeting. You didn't use that time to fix it. You used it to try and bury me. We were scared, she cried. We were trying to protect the neighborhood. I am the neighborhood too, I said. Aren't I? There was a silence on the other end. A long, heavy silence where the truth usually lived. You are, Carolyn said, voice cracking. Of course you are. That is why you have to do this. You are the strong one. Liv, you have always been the strong one. Karen is weak. If you do this, if you expose her like this, she will not survive it. She will shatter. She committed a felony. Carolyn. She made a mistake. Carolyn screamed, panic spiking into anger. Why do you have to be so black and white? Why do you have to be so cruel? I am not being cruel, I said. I am being honest, and I am tired of being the only one. If you send that email, Carolyn said, voice dropping to a low, desperate hiss. If you send the police to my door, I will never forgive you. Do you hear me? You will break my heart, and my heart cannot take it. You know my blood pressure. You know what the doctor said. She was doing it. She was playing the final card, the mortality card. Are you threatening me with your own death? I asked. I am telling you the consequences. She wept. I am telling you that if you destroy this neighborhood, the stress will kill me, and you will have to live with that. I looked at Miles. He was watching me. His jaw set, eyes fierce. He shook his head slightly. Don't take the bait. I love you, Carolyn, I said. But I am not responsible for your heart. And I am not responsible for Karen's crimes. I hung up. My hand was shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. The guilt was instant. A chemical flush of cortisol that made my stomach turn. I had been trained for 34 years to prevent that sound, the sound of a board member crying. I had been conditioned like a dog to flinch at their distress. Then the phone buzzed again. A text message from Karen popped up on the lock screen. The time was 7:45. You should have stayed quiet. I stared at the words, the title of my life, the instruction manual I had been given at birth. Then a second bubble appeared. If that email goes out, do not expect to have a neighborhood by noon. You know how fragile Carolyn is. If she has a stroke because of this, it is on you. You are killing her. Olivia, is your precious credit score worth Carolyn's life? I felt the air leave the room. It was monstrous. It was a level of manipulation that bordered on psychological warfare. She was using Carolyn's health as a human shield. She was holding a gun to Carolyn's head and telling me I was the one pulling the trigger. I put the phone down on the counter. I looked around my kitchen. I looked at the scuff mark on the floor where we had dragged the refrigerator in 2 years ago. I looked at the slightly crooked cabinet door that Miles kept promising to fix. I looked at the sunlight hitting the cheap laminate table where we ate our dinners. This house was small. It was imperfect. It was nothing compared to Karen's vaulted ceilings and marble islands. But it was quiet here. It was a quiet that I had built. It was a peace that didn't require me to lie. It was a sanctuary where I didn't have to pretend to be anything other than who I was. I had believed that neighborly love was an act of endurance. I thought that being a good resident meant swallowing the insults, absorbing the shocks, and smoothing over the cracks so nobody else had to see them. I thought that if I just stayed quiet enough, if I just made myself small enough, eventually they would see me. Eventually they would say, "Thank you, Olivia. Thank you for carrying the weight." But they never did. They just added more weight because to them I wasn't a person. I was a utility. I was a load-bearing wall that they could drill into whenever they needed to hang a new picture of themselves. I looked at the clock. 7:50. 10 minutes. I could stop it. I could pick up the phone, call Carolyn back, and say, "Okay, I will sign. I will take the debt. Just stop crying." If I did that, the phone calls would stop. The threats would stop. Karen would post a picture of us on the HOA page with the caption, "Neighbors forever." Carolyn would sleep tonight. But the loan would remain. The lie would remain, and I would spend the next 10 years paying for a house I didn't own, for a lifestyle I didn't live, for a president who despised me. I would be buying their approval with my life. And I realized standing there in the sunbeam that it was too expensive. I walked over to the laptop. The screen was dark. I tapped the spacebar. The image flared to life. The email client was open. The scheduled folder had a little number 1 next to it. I clicked on the folder. There it was. Subject: Formal affidavit scheduled for 8 o'clock. I opened the email one last time. I read the words. They were cold. They were clinical. They were the truth. I, Olivia Wallace, formally attest that I did not authorize. It wasn't an attack. It wasn't a weapon. It was a boundary. A boundary is not a wall you build to keep people out. It is a line you draw to show people where you end and they begin. And for the first time I was drawing it in permanent ink. 7:55. Miles walked over to me. He stood behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. He rested his chin on my shoulder. He looked at the screen. "You okay?" he asked. "No," I said. "I feel sick." "That's the withdrawal," he said. "Leaving a toxic system is like detoxing. Your body thinks it needs the poison to survive because that is all it has ever known." I leaned back into him. He was solid. He was real. "Do you think she will really—" I couldn't finish the sentence about Carolyn. "Carolyn is a survivor," Miles said. "She uses her fragility as a sword. She will be fine. She will be angry. She will be dramatic. But she will be fine. And if she isn't, that is not your fault. Liv, you are not God." 7:57. My phone buzzed again. A rapid-fire series of vibrations that rattled against the stone. I looked. Karen again. Answer me. Where are you? You are a coward. Then at 7:58, one final message. Who do you think you are? I stared at the question. It was meant to be an insult. It was meant to remind me of my place. Who do you think you are to challenge me? Who do you think you are to speak up? But in the silence of my kitchen, the question felt different. Felt like an invitation. Who do you think you are? Olivia, are you the little sister? Are you the doormat? Are you the background character? Or are you the woman who passed the certification exam on the first try? Are you the woman who bought her own house? Are you the woman who stands up for the law every single day at work? Because she believes that rules exist to protect people from bullies. I picked up the phone. I didn't unlock it. I just looked at my reflection in the black glass. I put it face down. I walked back to the coffee pot. I poured the cold coffee down the sink. It splashed against the stainless steel. Dark and muddy. I rinsed the mug. I dried it. I poured a fresh cup. The steam rose up, smelling of roast and morning. 7:59. I sat down on the stool. I sat up straight. I pulled my shoulders back. I uncrossed my legs and planted my feet flat on the floor. I looked at the laptop screen. The seconds were ticking away on the digital clock in the corner of the taskbar. 47. I didn't touch the mouse. I didn't hover over the cancel button. I folded my hands on the countertop and simply watched. I was witnessing the death of a lie. I was watching the burning of the script. It was terrifying. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff watching the ground crumble beneath my feet, but I also felt lighter. The heavy, suffocating blanket of potential and image was slipping off my shoulders. 57. My phone buzzed again. Long, persistent. A call. I didn't look. 59. I took a deep, full breath that filled my lungs completely. The numbers clicked over 8 o'clock on the screen. The email in the scheduled folder blinked once. Then, with a casual, almost anticlimactic speed, it vanished. The folder said empty. A notification popped up in the corner. Message sent. It was done. The documents were gone. The affidavit. The IP logs. The forged letterhead. The recordings, they were flying through the digital ether, landing in inboxes that could not be unread on servers that could not be scrubbed. The secret was out. The silence was broken. I let out the breath I had been holding. And in that exact second, the silence of the kitchen was shattered. My phone began to ring. It was a loud, jarring sound echoing off the walls. I looked at the screen. It wasn't Carolyn. It wasn't Karen. It was a local number. I picked it up. Hello. Is this Olivia Wallace? A male voice asked. It was professional, crisp, and serious. Yes. This is Detective Miller with the Columbus Division of Police Fraud Unit. We just received a priority referral from the Bank Security Division regarding an ongoing identity theft case. I have some documents here that were just forwarded to my desk. Do you have a moment to talk? I looked at Miles. He nodded. I looked at the empty scheduled folder. Yes, Detective, I said. I have time. The moment I hung up with Detective Miller, the world did not stop spinning. But for the first time in my life, it began to spin in the correct direction. The fallout was not an explosion. It was a landslide. It started slow with the grinding of gears in offices I would never see. And then it accelerated into a force that buried the lies the board had constructed under tons of bureaucratic rock. By 10 o'clock that morning, the machinery of consequence was fully operational. I spent the next 3 hours on the phone, not with Carolyn, who was leaving voicemails that ranged from sobbing incoherent pleas to cold hard rage. Not with Karen, whose silence was now deafening. I was on the phone with the fraud department of the bank. Once the affidavit was filed, the dynamic changed instantly. I was no longer the stubborn resident refusing to help. I was the cooperating witness in a federal inquiry. The bank moved with terrifying efficiency. They froze the loan account immediately. They flagged the disbursement because the funds had been transferred to a business account controlled by Karen. They initiated a clawback protocol. We have locked the funds, the fraud specialist told me. The recipient account has been frozen pending the investigation. You are not liable for this debt, Ms. Wallace. We have already sent a correction notice to the credit bureaus. Your score should reflect the removal of the trade line within 48 to 72 hours. Just like that, a few keystrokes, a sworn statement, and the $50,000 weight was lifted off my chest. But while the bank was cleaning up the numbers, Pinecrest Realty was cleaning up the personnel. I learned later what happened at the brokerage. I had carbon copied their compliance officer on my morning email. I had attached the forged employment letter on their letterhead. At 11:30, while Karen was likely trying to figure out why her bank cards were being declined at Starbucks, security walked into her office in Upper Arlington. They did not ask her for an explanation. In the corporate world, when you use company assets to commit fraud, there is no conversation. There is only risk mitigation. They seized her laptop. They seized her company phone. They escorted her out of the building in front of her colleagues, her clients, and the assistant she had likely bullied into notarizing that document. The compliance officer called me at noon. Ms. Wallace, he said, voice clipped and professional. We have received your documentation. We are conducting an immediate internal audit. The employment verification letter you submitted was not generated by our HR department. It appears to be a fabrication created on a personal device connected to our network. We are cooperating fully with the police investigation. The individual in question has been terminated effective immediately for gross misconduct and violation of our ethics charter. Terminated. The word hung in the air. Karen's career, the one she had built on smoke and mirrors, was gone. Not because I was jealous. Not because I was spiteful. But because she had typed a lie on the wrong stationery. But the real shock, the twist that turned my stomach and finally killed the last lingering calm of guilt I felt, came at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Detective Miller called me back. Ms. Wallace, I wanted to update you. We have pulled the suspect's financial history to trace the origin of the identity data. In doing so, we found something else. What? I asked, gripping the edge of my desk. This is not the first time this social security number has been used, nor is it the only identity associated with these IP addresses. We found 3 other loan applications over the last 4 years. Smaller amounts, $5,000 here, $10,000 there. All paid off eventually, but all opened under different names. I frowned. Different names. One was in the name of a Gordon Vance, the detective said, and 2 were in the name of a Carolyn Wallace. I froze. My board members? It appears so. It looks like the suspect has a habit of using family, neighborhood, members' identities to secure short-term financing when her cash flow is tight. She cycles the debt. She pays off one fraudulent loan with the proceeds from the next. It is a classic Ponzi structure, just kept within the HOA. I dropped the phone to my lap. Karen hadn't just stolen from me. She had been stealing from them for years. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Carolyn and Gordon weren't just protecting Karen from this one mistake. They were protecting a system. They knew. They had to know. You do not have loans taken out in your name and paid off without noticing the mail. The inquiries, the credit score fluctuations. They had allowed it. They had normalized it. They had taught her that the neighborhood was nothing more than a credit line to be harvested. And when she finally aimed her weapon at me, their panic wasn't about the crime. It was about the fact that I was the only one who hadn't agreed to be a victim. I drove to the board president's house at 5 o'clock. I didn't call first. I just went. The driveway was full. Karen's Mercedes was there, parked crookedly. Gordon's sedan was there. I walked to the front door. I didn't knock. I used the key I had carried on my keychain for years, the key to the clubhouse that had never really felt like home. I walked into the living room. It was a tableau of ruin. Carolyn was sitting on the white sofa, clutching a tissue, eyes swollen almost shut. Gordon was pacing by the fireplace, a glass of scotch in his hand, looking older than I had ever seen him. And Karen was standing in the middle of the room. She was still wearing the clothes she had been fired in. Her mascara was running down her face in black streaks. She looked wild, cornered, and dangerous. When I walked in, the room went silent. Karen spun around, eyes locked on mine, and for a second I thought she was going to attack me. "You?" she hissed. "Me," I said. I stood by the door, keeping my distance. "I heard you lost your job." "I lost everything," she screamed. The sound tore through the polite silence of the suburbs. "They walked me out. Olivia, they took my license. The board is opening an investigation. I will never sell real estate in this state again. Are you happy? Is this what you wanted?" "I didn't do that," I said, voice steady. "You did that. You typed the letter. You forged the signature. You sent the email." "I did it for us," she wailed. She turned to Carolyn, falling to her knees in front of the sofa. "Carolyn, tell her I was just trying to fix things. I was going to pay it back. I always pay it back." Carolyn looked down at Karen, but she didn't reach out to touch her hair. She didn't coo or comfort. She looked at her golden president with a strange, hollow expression. "She knows," Carolyn whispered. Karen froze. "What?" "The detective called," Gordon said. His voice was rough like gravel. He stopped pacing and looked at me. "He asked about the loans in my name from 2021. He asked about the remodeling loan Carolyn supposedly took out last year." Gordon looked at me, and for the first time I saw shame in his eyes. "We told him it was a mistake," Gordon said. "We told him we authorized them. We tried to cover for you again, Karen. But he has the IP logs. He knows you logged in as us. So you were all in on it," I said. "It wasn't a question." "We didn't know about your loan until last week," Carolyn said, voice trembling. "We knew she had borrowed from us before. We let it slide. We thought she is just ambitious. She just needs a leg up. We didn't think she would go after you. But when she did, you helped her hide it. We were trying to keep the neighborhood together," Carolyn cried. "What were we supposed to do? Send our president to jail?" "Yes," I said. "If she is a criminal, yes." "You are heartless," Karen spat from the floor. She stood up, wiping her face. The vulnerability was gone, replaced by pure venom. "You think you are so perfect with your little rules and your little compliance job. You are just jealous that I actually tried to be someone. You are jealous that I have vision." "I have vision too," I said. "I see you, Karen. Finally, I see exactly what you are." "You ruined me," she said, stepping toward me. "You took my life away." "No," I said. I didn't step back. I looked her in the eye. "I just stopped paying for it." She stared at me, mouth opening and closing, grasping for a weapon that wasn't there anymore. She couldn't threaten my job. She couldn't threaten my reputation. She couldn't threaten to tell Carolyn, because Carolyn was sitting right there, broken by the truth. The power dynamic in the room shifted. The gravity that had always pulled everything toward Karen reversed. I looked at Gordon. "You helped her with the application. You are going to have to explain that to the police. They are going to ask why a retired accountant was helping to falsify income documents." Gordon looked away. "I will handle my own affairs." "I'm sure you will," I said. I looked at Carolyn. She looked small. The matriarch who had ruled with guilt and expectations was gone. All that was left was an old woman who had bet everything on the wrong president. "You knew," I said to her. "You knew she was a fraud. And you let me think I was the failure because I wasn't flashy like her. You let me feel small because I didn't have her flash. But her flash was stolen, Carolyn. And you knew." Carolyn put her face in her hands and began to weep. It wasn't the manipulative crying of the phone call. It was the sound of a woman mourning her own vanity. "I am leaving," I said. "Olivia," Carolyn said, looking up. "Where are you going?" "Home," I said. "To my house." "But we need to figure this out," she said. "The police, the lawyers, we need a strategy." "No," I said. "You need a strategy. I have the truth. That is all I need." I turned around. I walked out the door. Karen shouted something after me. Something about how I would regret this. How I would be alone. I didn't stop. I didn't turn back. I walked to my car. The air outside was crisp and cold. The leaves were turning orange and red, falling from the trees. I got in the car and drove. I didn't drive fast. I drove the speed limit. I stopped at every stop sign. I signaled every turn. I pulled into my driveway. The lights were on in the kitchen. I could see Miles moving around inside. He was making dinner. I walked inside. The house smelled of garlic and roasting chicken. It smelled like reality. "Hey," Miles said. He turned around holding a wooden spoon. He looked at my face, searching for damage. "How was it?" "It is over," I said. "Did they?" He hesitated. "Are they okay?" "No," I said. "They are not okay. Karen is going to be charged. Gordon is going to be questioned. Carolyn is realizing that the story she told herself about our neighborhood was a lie." "And you?" Miles asked. "Are you okay?" I put my keys in the bowl by the door. I took off my coat. I felt lighter than I had felt in 20 years. "I am," I said, and I meant it. My phone was in my pocket. I took it out. I looked at the screen. There were no new messages. The silence was absolute. I turned the phone off. I placed it in the drawer of the entry table and closed it. "I am hungry," I said. Miles smiled. He poured 2 glasses of wine. We sat down at our small laminate table. The plates didn't match. The napkins were paper. There was no chandelier, no expensive centerpiece, no performance. I took a bite of the chicken. It was perfect. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't waiting for the criticism. I wasn't waiting for the bill. I had paid my dues. I had cleared my ledger. And as I looked across the table at the man who loved me, not for what I could give him but for who I was, I realized something. Karen was right about one thing. I should have stayed quiet, but not to protect them. I should have stayed quiet because they didn't deserve my words. They didn't deserve my energy. They didn't deserve my noise. But now the silence was mine. And it was beautiful. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was a wild ride through the dark side of HOA loyalty. And I hope it reminded you that your peace is worth more than their approval. Please comment below and let me know where you are listening from. I love seeing our community grow from all corners of the world. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the HOA Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button to support the work and smash the hype button so this story can reach even more people who might need to hear it. Stay strong and see you in the next one.